This is Camp Countdown, a Toronto Maple Leafs podcast series. I'm your host, Kyle Cushman, and on today's show, we're talking all about John Fusco. Now, you might be wondering, who is John Fusco? And it's very okay if you're asking that question, because Fusco is a 23-year-old defenseman out of Dartmouth College who was drafted 4 years ago by the Maple Leafs in the 7th round. There is not really any reason for him to be on your radar, but I think he showed enough last year going into his final season in the NCAA, where there's a chance that he could pop and potentially sign an NHL contract come next spring. So I thought he was worth including in this series versus some of the other kind of depth prospects at the end of the prospect pool that don't really have a chance of signing a pro contract, at least in the Leafs organization. So Fusco is coming off of a 7-goal, 17-point season with Dartmouth College last year, where Dartmouth really impressed. It's been a program that has been progressing in recent years, and they were excellent down the stretch. They went on a 6-1-1 run to close out the campaign. Fusco was great in those games as well. He had 4 goals and 10 points in that stretch, easily the best of his NCAA career. And for a Dartmouth team that has been a bottom feeder for the most part in recent years across the NCAA and in the ECAC conference, that resurgent season meant that they went into the ECAC playoffs and won a series against Union and went up against Cornell and gave them a fight. It was a really, really impressive end to the season for Dartmouth and for Fusco. And so I hope that we can see them carry that momentum into next season. Bit of a fun fact here for you. Dartmouth has a player by the name of Tucker McRae. He's actually the brother of Tate McRae. So if you're looking for a few degrees of separation there, Fusco plays with the brother of one of the biggest pop stars in the world. So there you go. That's a bit of a fun one for you. But for Fusco, he's going into his final season of NCAA eligibility. Unfortunately for him, he won't have the option of a 5th year like so many players have had in recent seasons, because this is going to be the final season of that extra year of COVID eligibility. So even if he was eligible for it, he doesn't have the option to take that 5th year. So this is going to be his final season in the NCAA. It's make it or break it time for John Fusco. And I think he's shown enough, at least offensively, that he could have a big season if Dartmouth takes another step next season to at least be on the radar of some NHL teams. Maybe not for an NHL contract. That might be a little out of his reach at this stage, but definitely is one of those intriguing flyers on an AHL contract. The big issue for Fusco is that he's undersized. He's 5'10", 190 pounds listed on Elite Prospects. That's average at best and on the smaller side for sure, at least height-wise, for defensemen. Even though he plays with some pace and plays with a little bit of power, it's not really to the point where you look at his frame and his statistical profile as potentially projecting to the NHL at this stage. But again, we're looking for one more season in the NCAA where he could potentially pop. The important part is looking at how Fusco got to this point. It's not like he's been consistently at this level and we kind of know what he is. He's consistently improved year over year in recent years, and he's doing so having kind of started behind the 8 ball. Back when Fusco was drafted in 2020, he was still playing the prep school ranks with Dexter Southfield School in Massachusetts. The important thing to note there is that he had actually been eligible for the 2019 draft and went undrafted. So he was an overage prospect that was drafted out of high school. It's not something that we see all too commonly. So Fusco was planning to go to Harvard, his original commitment, in 2020. That didn't happen because of COVID and Ivy League schools canceling their seasons. So instead of just sitting out the entire year, he opted to go to the USHL. He played a partial schedule that year with the Sioux City Musketeers of the USHL, only played 20 games and put up 12 points in that span, and finally joined Harvard the season afterwards. So at this point, we're talking about his second year post-draft, but his draft plus 3 season if we're talking about when he was originally eligible for the draft. He played 26 games, but didn't really play that much. He only had 2 points that season with Harvard and was basically their 6th, 7th, 8th defenseman on most nights. So As a draft +3 player in his early 20s, Fusco had played 20 games at the USHL level and had been a depth defenseman at best for a Harvard team in the ECAC. It just wasn't something that was putting him on a trajectory to be anything notable for an NHL drafted prospect. So he made the decision to transfer. He went to Dartmouth College beginning in 2022, still in the ECAC, so still playing against that level of competition, still an Ivy League school as well, and getting more minutes. He played 22 games in 22-23, had 3 goals and 11 points, starting to push things in terms of his trajectory. Last season, as I mentioned off the top, was the big season where he jumped up to 7 goals, 17 points, finished the season extremely well, as did Dartmouth, as they pushed to contend in the conference for the first time in quite a while. Ended up winning their playoff series against Union College and then lost in the second round against Cornell. That was the first playoff series that Dartmouth had won under head coach Reed Cashman, and it was the first time that they had won a playoff series since 2019 when they won in the first round against St. Lawrence. This is not a school that has a ton of success in its hockey history. You have to go back a long time to see any kind of consistent success in terms of ECAC playoff wins and things like that. And you have to go back to like the 80s since they've played in the national tournament. So this is not a school that has consistently produced big seasons on their men's hockey side. So for Fusco, it's definitely a team that he transferred to that would give him the opportunity to play more, and he's helped the program progress up the standings and be more competitive in his 2 seasons, especially at the end of last season. So the hope going into next year is that Dartmouth can continue to progress. Fusco takes another big jump and gets maybe around the point per game mark and maybe gets some interest, probably not on an NHL contract, all things considered, but maybe for an AHL contract. So we'll see if things go well for Dartmouth and for Fusco in his final season in the NCAA, and I hope we do, because it's always fun to see a guy like him find his way into an NHL organization after kind of battling through a bunch of different circumstances, between transferring from Harvard to Dartmouth, between losing what was originally supposed to be his freshman season, not playing kind of any elite competition until his draft +2 season, not really playing a regular role at the NCAA until he was like 22 years old, all of those factors. So for Fusco, he's going to be 23 for this entire season. It's going to be make it or break it time for John Fusco going into this season. So that's going to do it for this edition of Camp Countdown. Just a kind of quick one on a player that probably isn't going to be in the Leafs organization this time next year, but you never know based off of what he's done the past couple of seasons. He could do enough to at least earn an AHL contract or a cameo at the end of this upcoming season. I hope you enjoyed this edition, and if you haven't already, be sure to check out the previous episodes. We've got lots between prospects, guys pushing for NHL roster spots, and guys like Matt Nyes, OEL, Timothy Liljegren already in the fold as well. Thanks for listening, and we'll be back tomorrow for another big episode of Camp Countdown. See you then.